Have you ever felt like you're slowly fading from the eyes of others? Even though you're always present, always kind, always giving? You reply to every message. You show up when they need you. You're the first to say, it's okay. But something shifts. Gratitude fades. Your effort is no longer appreciated. It's expected. And slowly, you become invisible. Your presence starts to feel like background noise, like a song played too often. No one's really listening anymore. This isn't your fault. It's a trap, one that good people fall into often, and the Stoics saw it coming long ago. What is abundant is rarely valued, they warned. The issue isn't your kindness. It's the lack of boundaries around it. When kindness becomes unlimited, it turns into obligation. In this video, we'll change that. Not by becoming cold, but by becoming clear. By drawing the line where others expect endless access to you. If you've ever felt overlooked or taken for granted, this message is for you. Because once your presence becomes rare, you won't need to ask for respect. You'll command it without saying a word. So stay with me. And if this resonates, hit like and subscribe. Here we don't just study Stoicism, we live it. We turn it into a discipline for living with strength, clarity, and weight.
Number 1.
The illusion of always being available. Have you ever noticed a strange paradox? The more available you are, the less people seem to value you. You're the one who always reaches out first. You're the one who checks in, who remembers, who listens. At first they thank you, then they expect you. Eventually they stop noticing altogether. Your effort becomes invisible. Your kindness becomes background noise. What was once appreciated becomes assumed, and what was once a choice becomes your assigned role. The one who's always there. But here's the truth. You're not wrong for caring. You're not weak for showing up. You're just missing one essential thing. A boundary. The Stoics saw this pattern centuries ago and named it plainly. What is overabundant is rarely seen as valuable. When you're always accessible, you send a message without knowing it. One that says, my time is endless, my presence is guaranteed, I'll always be here. And once people believe that, they stop seeing you as someone who carries weight. You become part of the furniture, expected, faded, taken for granted. What's more, you may think your kindness will lead to love, to loyalty, to respect. But in reality, without boundaries, kindness turns into service, and service turns into obligation. Every time you yield, you train them to believe there is no limit. Every time you stay silent when disrespected, they assume you have no standards. Every time you say it's okay, even when it's not, you teach them there's nothing sacred left to protect in you. Marcus Aurelius once said, a man's worth is no greater than his ambitions. If your deepest ambition is simply to be needed or liked, then you'll keep shrinking yourself to meet the needs of everyone else. You'll disappear inside the roles they hand you. But Stoicism doesn't teach us to become invisible. It teaches us to become solid, to stand firm in who we are. And part of that is learning that kindness, without clarity, is not virtue. It's self-abandonment. Picture this. You give someone a gift every week. The first time, they're touched. The second time, they smile. The third, they expect it. And by the fourth, if you don't bring it, they're disappointed. Why? Not because you failed, but because generosity became routine. It lost its meaning. And that's what happens when your presence is constant and unquestioned. It stops being valued. This is the quiet, painful tragedy of good people who never say enough. They become so easy to reach, so eager to please, so endlessly giving, that others forget there's a person underneath. Then they wonder why no one treats them with care. But they've shown the world how to treat them by never showing themselves limits. In this world, being overly friendly is often confused with weakness. But you can be kind and still have standards. You can be helpful without being a doormat. You can be warm without letting everyone into your fire. That's not coldness, that's awareness. And it's time to wake up.
Number 2.
Your energy has a price. Before we talk about boundaries, there's something simple but essential that must be acknowledged. Your energy, your time, and your attention are not free. They are limited resources. They are personal currency. And like anything of value, when you give them away too easily, people begin to treat them as disposable. This isn't pessimism. It's basic human behavior. What is always present fades into the background. It becomes noise. What costs nothing is valued as nothing. Consider a glass of water. On an ordinary day, it's overlooked, taken for granted. But on a blazing hot afternoon, when your throat is dry and your body exhausted, that same water becomes priceless. Now think of a rare vintage wine, one kept for special celebrations. It's not chugged or ignored. It's poured with care, savored slowly, reserved for those moments that matter. Why? Because it's rare, because it's not always available. Scarcity creates meaning, and selectivity sends a message. I know my energy has value, and I choose where it flows. When you respond instantly to every message, when you open yourself to everyone, when you're always ready to serve, whether you realize it or not, you're sending a deeper signal. I need to be included. I need to be accepted. And as Marcus Aurelius warned, approval from the crowd is a weak foundation upon which to build your dignity. If your self-worth is attached to how quickly others respond, how often they invite you, or how needed you feel, you are building your identity on shifting sand. Eventually, that sand gives way, and you're left wondering why no one values what you offered so freely. People may not say it aloud, but they will test your value. They'll delay their replies, ignore your presence, and watch how you react. If you keep showing up, keep giving, keep chasing, despite their silence, they will quietly decide, he needs me more than I need him. And from that moment, the balance of power tips, not toward you, away from you. This is what the Stoics called quiet self-destruction. It's the slow erosion of self-respect in the name of connection. You think you're building bonds, but really you're trading your energy for scraps of recognition. You're not giving from wholeness, you're giving from fear. And fear, when not checked, becomes the easiest emotion to manipulate. You think you're being noble, but you're being drained. And the more you give under pressure, the more invisible you become. Look at those who carry real weight, people like Oprah Winfrey or Brené Brown. They do not respond to everything. They are not everywhere. They guard their focus, they filter their time, and they protect their peace. And it's that very discipline that earns them respect. Not because they're aloof, but because they know their worth, and so does everyone else. Epictetus put it clearly, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. When you retreat at the right time, stay silent at the right moment, and show up only when it aligns with your values. You don't have to beg to be noticed. Your energy becomes your voice, and it speaks with a power that silence alone can carry.
Number 3.
From seeking approval to the authority of silence, there is one simple question that can change how you move through the world. If I wasn't afraid of losing this person, this opportunity, or this approval, what would I stop doing immediately? That answer is your gateway to clarity, and clarity doesn't come from changing others. It begins when you stop negotiating your value in exchange for validation. It begins when you reclaim the authority to say, enough. What drains us isn't always the task at hand. It's the invisible weight of wanting to be accepted. We over-explain ourselves to avoid being misunderstood. We hold our breath, soften our tone, say yes when our soul is screaming no. But the Stoics didn't live for applause. They lived for alignment. They didn't chase attention. They cultivated dignity. They didn't need approval to act with principle. They acted from inner strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not what others do that matters, but what you do." And once you stop chasing acceptance, everything changes. You stop offering your presence where it's assumed. You stop bringing your best to people who don't even bring their bare minimum. Not because you've become hard, but because you've become aware. Awareness sharpens your posture. It lifts your standards, and standards silently teach others how to treat you. The people who carry real presence aren't loud. They don't compete for the spotlight. But when they enter the room, the air shifts. Why? Because they've chosen themselves, and people feel that. Their stillness speaks. Their silence carries weight. Their energy says, "I am not here to impress. I am here because I've chosen to be." When you begin to pull your energy back, not from bitterness, but from deep self-respect, you no longer need to justify your exit. You stop chasing those who withdraw from you. You stop initiating conversations that leave you empty. This isn't withdrawal out of anger. It's clarity. It's the disciplined act of protecting your spirit from the erosion of constant compromise. The Stoics taught one eternal truth. What is rare is respected. When you reduce your availability, when you become selective with your presence, your silence begins to do what words never could. You stop trying to be heard in every room. You start letting your restraint speak on your behalf, and people adjust. Think about the last time you did something just to avoid being left out. Maybe you stayed in a conversation that no longer felt honest. Maybe you smiled when something inside you broke. That moment didn't make you weak. It simply revealed the cost of living for approval. And this is why, when you finally stop, when you walk away without noise, when you go quiet not to punish but to return to yourself, people notice. Not because you demanded attention, but because you no longer needed it. They feel you more in your absence than they ever did in your words. And ironically, it's when you no longer seek approval that your presence becomes undeniable, not as noise, but as quiet strength.
Number 4.
Curate your relationships, protect your energy. There's a truth many people aren't ready to face. Not everyone who stands beside you is truly for you. Some remain close only because they're comfortable with the older version of you. The version that was always available, always agreeable, always saying yes. And when you begin to evolve, when you start to grow, they become uncomfortable because their comfort is built on the condition that you never change. Their place in your life depends on you staying where you are. But the Stoics taught us to move in the opposite direction. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with people who will make you better." This wasn't just a piece of moral advice. It was a philosophy of survival, because energy is not neutral. It transfers, it rubs off. If you spend your days surrounded by confusion and noise, you will begin to carry that same chaos within you. But if you surround yourself with order, with calm, with depth, you grow in those same directions. This is why selectivity isn't arrogance. It's wisdom. You're not better than anyone. You've simply understood something they might not have yet. Your energy is a sacred resource, and what's sacred must be guarded. You don't have to explain this. You don't have to make a grand exit. All you have to do is begin to step away from spaces that deplete you, slowly, quietly, without anger, without apology. Oprah Winfrey once said, "You can't soar while dragging people who refuse to lift themselves." That's not cold, that's clarity. When you spend all your strength carrying the weight of others who will not move, you begin to lose the strength to carry your own mission. The cost is silent, but real. This is the quiet transformation that Stoics understood well. When you begin saying no, not from rejection, but from reverence. When you choose silence, not as a weapon, but as a boundary. When you stop replying to complaint-filled messages, when you exit circular conversations, you're not shutting people out. You're letting your nervous system breathe again. You're reestablishing emotional balance, And here's what's surprising. When you reclaim your energy from what drains you, you suddenly have more to give to what uplifts you. You gain time for still mornings. You gain clarity for ideas worth pursuing. You gain space for meaningful conversations. And you open yourself to deeper connections with people who nourish your peace, not disturb it. Marcus Aurelius warned, if you waste time debating how to live well, you'll never live well. He embodied this by being deliberate about what he engaged with, who he surrounded himself with, and what he permitted to shape his mind. You can do the same. No drama, no conflict, just firm clarity. Because anyone who disrespects your time will eventually disrespect your growth. And if someone resents your boundaries, don't take it personally. They're not mad because you've wronged them. They're mad because you've finally taken away the privilege they were never supposed to have.
Number 5.
When your presence becomes rare, in the modern world, being endlessly available doesn't earn you respect. In fact, it does the opposite. You are respected not for how often you show up, but for how you carry yourself when you do. Respect rises when your presence carries weight, and that weight only exists when you become selective with your time, your energy, and the space you allow others to enter. There's a truth few want to acknowledge. Every day through your actions, you are teaching people how to treat you. Each time you say yes while your inner voice is whispering no. Each time you respond to a message at midnight. Each time you cancel your own plans to please someone else. You send a signal. My boundaries are flexible, and when your boundaries can be bent, your value begins to blur. People stop asking for access, they assume it. The Stoics never taught us to live with hardness, but with structure. They didn't ask us to prove our worth through exhaustion. They taught us to define our worth through principle. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man should stand upright, not be kept upright." What he meant was simple. Your value should not depend on how others see you, but on how deeply you've built yourself from within. When you begin to act as if your presence is a gift, not a given, others begin to treat it that way. Why are diamonds valuable? Not just because of their brilliance, but because of their rarity. Consider Steve Jobs, consider Maya Angelou. They didn't need to be seen everywhere to be remembered. When they showed up, people paid attention, not because they made noise, but because they carried substance. Their restraint gave their presence gravity. You don't need to attend every gathering, answer every call, or be available to everyone all the time. In fact, the more accessible you are, the more you risk being invisible. Your presence should not feel common. It should feel earned. The people around you should learn to feel it as a privilege, not as a guarantee. When you say things like, "I'm not available right now," or "I need this evening to reset," or "I'll get back to you when I'm ready," you're not being cold, you're sending a quiet message. I'm no longer giving all of myself away. And it's in those moments that your presence begins to carry more weight than any performance ever could. Let people miss you. Let your absence create reflection. In a world obsessed with constant visibility, disappear on purpose. Because it's interruption that creates reverence. It's restraint that builds power. It's your absence that makes people realize what they took for granted. The Stoics called this the power of temperance, not retreat, but intention. You don't have to remove yourself from the world. You just have to stop giving your presence to everything that doesn't deserve it. And when you do, you'll find that the world begins to treat you differently, because you finally started treating yourself with gravity. Number 6, the power of silence. We live in a time when everyone wants to speak, but very few ever pause to truly listen, not to others, but to themselves. Out of fear of being misunderstood, out of anxiety that silence will be mistaken for weakness, we fill the space with noise. We explain, we justify, we talk. But there comes a moment, usually in pain, when we realize the more we speak, the more our presence starts to fade. That's when we begin to relearn an ancient form of communication, the language of silence. The Stoics never saw silence as emptiness. They saw it as refinement, as inner discipline. Epictetus reminded us, if someone insults you, remember, you are not compelled to respond. That sentence is not just advice. It is a gateway to power, because the moment you realize you don't have to react, you take back control from the outside world and place it firmly within. You see, the faster you react, the more predictable and controllable you become. But when you can remain still in the heat of emotion, when you can pause instead of lashing out, you don't just maintain your composure, you hold the upper hand. Picture a man seated quietly in a room filled with noise and accusation. He says nothing. His eyes don't flinch. That calm presence unsettles the room, and without raising his voice, he speaks volumes. Think of the last time you stayed silent when someone pushed your buttons. At first, you may have felt small, but wait a little longer. Suddenly, the dynamic changes. The other person becomes unsure, uncomfortable. They don't know what you're thinking. They no longer control the frame. That's when the power shifts. Because silence, when used with purpose, is not avoidance. It's command. Steve Jobs was a master of this. During his presentations, he often paused after making a powerful point. That brief silence forced the audience to lean in. Not because he shouted, but because he knew that when words are rare, they carry more weight. He used silence as punctuation, strategic, deliberate, and effective. In everyday life, the same principle applies. You don't have to win arguments with noise. When someone disrespects you, you don't need to react. When your name is in other people's mouths, you don't need to defend it, because intentional silence becomes a mirror. It reflects their character back at them, not yours. Marcus Aurelius said, "Do not let your mind be ruled by what is outside of your control." And how others behave, that's out of your hands, but how you respond, that's your training ground. That's your path to power. Silence is not weakness. It is a conscious decision, a powerful tool. In a world drowning in noise, the one who can hold their peace stands out, not because they overpower, but because they outlast. They speak when it matters, and when they do, people listen, because that voice comes from a place of clarity, not chaos. That, the Stoics believed, is the essence of real power. The ability to stay still while the world spins around you, and to speak only when your words are worth more than your silence. Number 7, freedom in your disappearance. There's something few people have the courage to admit. What steals your peace and inner power every day isn't failure. It's dependence. Dependence on being seen, dependence on approval, validation, and applause. In a world that measures worth through likes, shares, and instant replies, many people no longer live authentically. They perform, and performance is exhausting. You begin to feel drained, disconnected, constantly reacting to the rhythms of other people. Marcus Aurelius once observed, "We love ourselves more than anyone else, yet we value others' opinions above our own." That single contradiction defines our modern anxiety. We abandon our truth to maintain appearances, and it costs us our peace. So sometimes the wisest response is not another explanation. It's not a louder voice. Sometimes the answer is to disappear, not out of avoidance, but out of clarity. When you pull back your energy, your presence, and your reactions from spaces that no longer deserve them, you're not running away. You're setting the stage for others to finally face themselves. Epictetus said, "If someone doesn't value you, don't get angry. Walk away quietly." That isn't weakness, that's boundary. That's how you say, "I will not compete to be seen. If you can't recognize my value, I will no longer offer explanations." That quiet exit speaks louder than any argument ever could. What's surprising is how your absence begins to carry more weight than your presence ever did. When you step away at the right moment, you create a void, and in that void, people finally pause. They reflect. They're left alone with the noise they once drowned you in, and for the first time, they feel the weight of what they took for granted. But let's be clear, disappearing doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've given yourself back. You're no longer spending energy proving, persuading, or performing. You're choosing to live rooted in your own rhythm, slower, deeper, more deliberate. And in that space, something remarkable happens. Your thoughts become clearer, your values sharper, and your dignity quieter but undeniable. Think of people like Rick Rubin, the legendary music producer. He rarely appears in public. He doesn't chase attention, but when he speaks, the world listens. Not because he's loud, but because he's rare. And rarity itself becomes a message. I choose when and where to be seen. Likewise, you don't have to disappear forever. You only need to step back long enough to hear your own voice again, to realign your direction, to ask yourself what still matters, and what needs to be let go. In that withdrawal, you regain power, and when you return, you won't be the same person who left. You'll carry a silence that has been refined into strength. The Stoics called this an intentional retreat. Not a punishment, but a restoration. Not a cry for attention, but a rebuilding of foundation. Because sometimes the most powerful move you can make isn't to respond. It's to disappear, just long enough for others to realize what they had and what they've just lost. Number 8, rising in silence. There is a kind of strength that doesn't come from arguing, doesn't come from resistance, and certainly doesn't come from trying to prove yourself. It comes from stepping back quietly, then returning stronger, clearer, without needing to say a single word. That is how you rise without making noise. And that is how the Stoics lived. Imagine this. You spend a month off social media, not messaging people who drain your energy, not caring who said what. During that time, you read, you write, you train your body and sharpen your mind. You give yourself the space to breathe again, and then you return. But something has changed, not because you forced it, but because silence transformed you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." And sometimes becoming that person doesn't require an announcement. It doesn't need a status update. It just needs action. Calm, focused, persistent action. Let your results speak for you, not your explanations. There's a quiet rhythm to real growth. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't broadcast itself. And yet, it shapes the strongest people. Look at those with lasting influence. They don't fill every room. They don't speak just to be heard. But when they do speak, people listen. Not because they chase attention, but because the stillness of their presence has weight. Rick Rubin once said, "Real creativity happens when you stop performing." And that wisdom applies just as deeply to becoming whole again. You don't need to prove that you've healed, changed, or grown. You just need to live in alignment with your values and allow consistent practice to build your foundation. In truth, silent ascension reveals itself through small but steady acts. You stop chasing debates that go nowhere. You no longer feel the need to defend yourself at every turn. You walk away from competitions that never served your peace. You slow down, but your focus sharpens. You speak less, but every word has clarity. And in that silence, something powerful begins to take root. Self-trust. You stop asking the world for permission. You stop measuring your worth through applause. You begin to define success by how aligned you feel, not how admired you appear. And slowly, your silence begins to speak louder than your old explanations ever could. This isn't retreat, it's refinement. When you stop wasting energy on what lies beyond your control, your clarity deepens. You return to yourself. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop needing others to understand you, they begin to respect your presence more. The Stoics called this leading from within, not in the sense of dominating others, but in mastering your own inner world. You don't need a spotlight, you don't need applause, you just need a direction and the quiet strength to follow it. Because in the end, what earns respect isn't how loud you rise. It's your ability to hold your dignity when no one's watching. And that is how you rise, not with noise, but with intentional silence. If you've made it this far, you already sense the truth. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the strongest. Real power doesn't demand attention. It commands it through clarity, restraint, and quiet discipline. That's the essence of Stoicism, not suppression, but selection, not isolation, but intention. You don't need to explain why you've changed, why you're less available, less reactive, less eager to be seen. Your energy speaks for you now, and what it says is simple. I know who I am, and I know what I'm no longer available for. So here's your invitation. Step back, not in defeat, but in design. Reclaim your focus. Protect your peace. Let your silence unsettle what your words never could. Because when you stop chasing validation and start embodying your values, something shifts. People don't just hear you, they feel you. You don't just walk in, you anchor the space. If this message speaks to you, leave the word alignment in the comments. It tells me you're not just watching, you're walking this path. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because here, we're not chasing trends. We're building something rare: inner clarity, stoic strength, and quiet power.